In this video, let's see how to install the Dataplane on Google Cloud Platform. First and foremost, you must log into your Axle Data account. Select the Register option from the left navigation bar. In the Data Sources page, select Dataplanes. To create a new Dataplane, click the Setup Dataplane button after being redirected. Now on the Setup Dataplane page, enter some information to configure GCP. The first is the name of the Dataplane. It is optional to provide a description. Select GCP from the Cloud Provider drop-down menu for the Dataplane installation. When you select this option, you will be presented with a list of additional parameters that must be entered in order to set up GCP. Project ID, bucket name, client email, private key, processor type, and so on are examples of these parameters. These specifics are required in order to save data reliability results in the Google Cloud. This is the domain name that the user must enter, and after creating the Dataplane in GCP, you will be assigned a load balancer IP address. The user must map this domain name to that specific public IP address in their DNS. Once all of the details have been entered, click the Submit button. When you click the Submit button, a values.yaml file will be downloaded to your system. You must upload this values file to the GCS bucket. This file will further be consumed during the Dataplane creation in GCP. Navigate to your GCP account. In the left corner, click the hamburger menu. Then, from the list of options, choose Cloud Storage, and from the drop-down menu, choose Buckets. To create a new bucket, click the Create button at the top. Give it a title. In the following steps, you will use this bucket name as an input during Dataplane creation. Now we'll have to upload the YAML file into the bucket. The YAML file was uploaded successfully to the GCP bucket. Now copy the bucket's name because it will be needed in the next step. Launch your terminal. The first step is to use this command to download the Google deployment templates. This command will be provided in the README file. When you run the command, a GCP file will be downloaded. Then extract the zip and open it in an editor. The zip file will contain a GCP folder as well as a deployment folder and a templates folder. Now you must open the complete.yaml file in the deployment folder and update a few details in the files resources section. Only the fields marked as mandatory must be updated. The remaining fields are optional and can be changed if necessary. You can access the deployment folder directly from the terminal. This is the name of the cluster that will be created in your GCP account for Dataplane service installations. The template is divided into two sections. The first section creates a Kubernetes cluster, and the second section creates a tiny VM for service initialization. When the cluster is created, the VM installs all utilities, downloads the Axle Data Helm charts containing the services, and connects to the Kubernetes cluster, where it installs all services. The cluster name is one of the mandatory fields. This name must now be unique and contain no spaces or special characters. The region to which you want to deploy is the next required field. Even though the location is marked optional, you must ensure that the zone is within the region specified in the region field. You can deploy the cluster into more than one zone. I only mentioned one deployment zone or data center here. The mandatory VPC name comes next. This is the VPC to which the cluster should be deployed. This must also be in the same region. Following that is the subnet to which you must deploy the cluster. It is important to note that when you create the subnet for this cluster, you must also create two secondary ranges in the subnet called pods and services. To demonstrate this, go to the VPC network, select the VPC that you just entered, and ensure that the secondary ranges have been created in the subnet. For instance, this is the subnet I'm using. As you can see, two subnet ranges have been created. If you don't have either, you can add the details for the subnet ranges by clicking the Edit button at the top. This is required for the cluster. The next required field appears in the Initialization VM section. This is the bucket that you previously created in your GCS account and uploaded the values.yaml file that was downloaded from the control plane. This is the name of the bucket, and here is the uploaded values.yaml file. You must include their names in the mandatory sections. You are ready to run once all of the mandatory fields have been updated. However, you must first install utilities such as Google Cloud CLI. Based on the type of your local machine, you can download the CLI from this specific URL. Once the Google Cloud CLI is installed, you must log into the Google Cloud account using the CLI. To log in, run the command gcloud auth login. You will be taken to this page and prompted to log in. After selecting the appropriate account, click Allow. You should see a message indicating that you have been authenticated with Google Cloud CLI. Close the tab and return to the terminal. If you have more than one project in your account, use the following command to specify which project you want to deploy the cluster to. Set project name with the following command: gcloud config set project name. The Dataplane is now ready for deployment. Run the command gcloud deployment manager deployments to deploy the Dataplane. Create a deployment name. This name should be unique. To make sure the process is easier and to help you remember the name it the same name as you did when you created the cluster. Then type --config followed by the name of the YAML file. When using the terminal, make sure you're in the deployment folder. Click enter and wait for the deployment to complete. You will see the newly created data plane in the control plane in the installing state until the installation is complete and all services are running. The status will change to running once the services are running in the GCP data plane. Make sure that after the data stack is created in the terminal, after the deployment is finished, the domain name is mapped to the load balancer IP that you get after the terminal execution is finished. You must map this domain name to the public IP address. Now you must wait for the deployment to be completed. The stack has now been created. You can now see that the output is the load balancer IP. You must ensure that you copy this and go to your DNS. For demonstration purposes, I'll go to the AWS U53 DNS zone. Open the zone and press the record button. Enter the domain name you specified in the values.yaml file. Then paste the load balancer IP address you copied from the terminal output. In this case, we already have a record, which I will now update. I'll change the load balancer IP address that I copied from the terminal. This is required for GCP to issue an SSL certificate for this domain. Until and unless this IP is properly mapped in your DNS and propagated, GCP will not provision a certificate for it. As a result, make sure you create this entry with the smallest TTL value possible. I've set the TTL value to 60 seconds. As a result, propagation occurs as soon as possible. Install the kube control utility on your local machine and connect to the cluster to check the status of the deployment services and the provisioning of the certificate. Simply go to the Kubernetes engine and select clusters from the drop-down menu to connect to the cluster. Select the newly created cluster and click connect. This is not mandatory, but if you want to validate, you can connect to the cluster and check the status of the services this way. I can get the credentials to connect to the cluster this way, and you can check the status of all the services with the kube control utility. As you can see, some of the services are currently running, while others have been completed. You can also check the certificate status. The certificate is currently in provisioning mode. you are generating a certificate for the domain specified in the values.yaml file using GCP. Once provisioning is complete, you should be able to access the Dataplane via this URL. When the creation is finished, the installing state should change to running. As you can see, the installation is finished. It will take a few minutes to fully provision, so you will have to wait. You can now add data sources as the installation is complete and the services are running. Navigate to the data sources page, click on add data source and then choose a data source. Give it a title. Choose the data plane that we just created. Enter the data source connection information and click the test connection button. Then press the next button. Select and enter the necessary details if you've enabled both compute observability and data reliability. Finally, click the Submit button. A successful configuration edit message box will appear. You can either directly go to the data sources page or start the crawler and go to the data sources page. This allows you to crawl the data source and retrieve your information. We hope you have gained an understanding on how to install Dataplane on GCP. Thank you for watching.